if you're struggling to be vulnerable and transparent, but you know that you need to be a little bit more of that to help yourself, to help others, we're going to step into how to do that today. I'm Rickey Jasper, and this is the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. After getting laid off 2 times in 6 months, I realized I had to be chasing a greater vision in my life. I had to be walking into my calling. I spent time building up a successful fitness apparel business, and then now stepping back in front of camera to talk, to speak more, to hopefully inspire you to chase a greater vision in your life. And my goal with this podcast is for us to do it together. So let's make it happen. What's going on? I'm Ricky, and this is the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Today's episode is going to be great. Why? It's probably because I'm going to be very, very open, raw, and vulnerable about things. The title of today is How to Be More Vulnerable and Why It's So Helpful to Yourself and to Others. We live in a day and age, and I'll speak from a male perspective, where it's hard to be open because it can be very easily scrutinized. Any opinion that we put out on social media or any time we talk about subjects, it can be very highly scrutinized and make us feel so bad about it that we never really want to open up. And a lot of the transformations that I've had in my life, it's because I've opened up or somebody else has opened up to me. And so I'll get into a lot of that today. It's going to actually be pretty deep, pretty heavy, but it is what it is. We're going to go there. We're going to go there even more in these podcasts as it goes on, because I love doing that. So today's head and heart hit. Now, what the head and heart segment is, it's something that hit me in the head, made me think logically, something that hit me in the heart, made me feel a certain way. This can be a quote from social media, something I heard on a YouTube, another great podcast, or anything like that. And I don't always know the author of it. So today, I don't know the author, but it's a quote. Your transparency will lead to other people's transformation. So where it hit me in the head made me think logically. I was like, wow, that actually does make sense. The more that I'm transparent about myself, or the more that I'm transparent about any issues or problems that I've had, it could lead to transformation for someone else. Someone else can intake that knowledge, and they can either be going through that storm or they can be heading to that storm, and they will have the tools that will equip them to go through it and be just fine. Where it hit me in the heart and made me feel a certain way, I was like, wow, there's a lot of examples of my life where I've been very transparent, where it's led to my transformation or it's led to a relational transformation. And also there's been areas, and I'll talk candidly about my dad, where he's been very transparent about things and it's led to my transformation as a man and growing up. So those things and being transparent is so vital and important. And if you're a more closed off person, I know that this can be a hard thing, because I, in areas of vulnerability and transparency, was not the best at. It's easy to be on camera and talk for me, but to actually get deeper was not easy, right? I would mask a lot of things. So but that transparency has helped so much for myself, and other people's have helped for me too. So if you are a closed-off person, just know that the more that you practice it, the easier it gets, the better it gets, the more it helps you, and the more that you're able to help other people. So we're going to get into our 3 tips and tricks of the day to help you be more vulnerable, be more transparent, to help other people and yourself as well. Number 1, level the view of yourself. I'll talk about me and we'll get into it. So when I was about 18 to probably 28, I thought that I was God's gift to the world, God's gift to women, all of that. You couldn't tell me anything. If I got offended or whatever, hey, you're out, you're gone. If there's anything wrong with the relationship, well, I'm not being true to the relationship. I'm stepping out, I'm doing whatever, and I'm masking all of the insecurity, because at the end of the day, well, I don't want to be vulnerable with the fact that, I just don't think that I can be a great active participant in a relationship. One, because especially at the time I was working for myself, or I was working for 413, my finances were low. I was financially insecure, and even before that, I was like, I just feel like I just don't have the necessary tools to be ready for a committed relationship. I didn't have a level view of myself. You aren't the main character in most people's story. I had the view of myself that I was the main character of everybody's story. When I step in the room, it's about me, how other people are going to serve me, what they're going to do for me, how they're going to act around me, what they're going to say to me, how it's all going to benefit me. I thought that I was the main person. If you ask people who knew me back then, they probably watch this podcast and are like, this is fake because this is not who this guy is. And I understand that because it makes so much sense. I thought that I was the main character in everybody else's story. The other thing is, I didn't realize that if I opened up about these things, other people have these issues too. That's a reason for being vulnerable. You realize that you connect. Pain connects, insecurity connects, vulnerability connects, transparency connects, because we're all humans. We're all living a human experience, which is different, but it's also the same in a lot of senses because we are human. So having a level view of yourself just means that, okay, I'm human. I have problems and issues and insecurities like everybody else. I am not the main character in everybody's story. Most of the time, nobody's even thinking about me because everybody is often thinking about themselves or how the world is perceiving themselves. So that helps, because when you are vulnerable and transparent, you realize that it's okay doing this podcast when I'm a little bit more vulnerable or transparent. It's like, well, I put it out there, and okay, even if some get 2 views, if some get more views, and if and when hopefully this thing pops off and it gets millions of views, it's like, well, at the end of the day, people watch and I'm still not the main character in that story. It keeps me level-headed, and it also really levels the playing field. Even if you think of your favorite celebrity who has all the social clout and everything, how often are you really thinking about them throughout the day? Probably not often. And that's somebody who has so much social clout or whatever. So if we're just mostly day-to-day people, not everybody is always thinking of us. So make sure you're leveling the view of yourself, because when you do, you'll realize that being vulnerable, it doesn't cost you anything, because not everybody every day is thinking about your mistakes. Not everybody every day is thinking about areas where you've fallen short. If anything, they are taking that and they're connecting with you, which is a beautiful thing. You want that connective tissue with the areas that you're being vulnerable, and it opens conversation. It establishes relationships. It builds stronger relationships because it gives you areas that you can really support. So this leads into tip number 2, let your guard down. In church it was a few months ago, it was like we let God into our living room, but not our bedroom. And I thought that was interesting. And I was like, it's probably a lot of our relationships with people. We let everybody into our living room. What is our living room? Our living room is what we want others to perceive us as. We want them to see us as these perfect people. We want us. It's the social media effect of real life. It's what we want to show people when they come in contact with us, but it's not always who we are. When Carly and I started dating, she was the first woman who I really, really was brutally honest with. And I'm about to be brutally honest here. If you know me well, like if you're in my circle, you know this story. If you don't know this story at all. So this is where I'm being more vulnerable and transparent in this podcast. So we dated for a little bit, a few weeks, and then I cut it off because I was like, I don't know if this is it. I was still out in the streets, I wasn't ready to settle down. And then, about a week later, I called her and I was like, hey, can we just talk? And I laid it out for her. I was very vulnerable. And I was like, everything I'm about to say is probably going to be very contradictory, but I just need you to know so that you know who I am and so that you know what you're potentially walking into. And at the time I was 27. I was like, I'm currently in San Diego, but I don't want to live here long term. Carly is from San Diego and her family lives in San Diego. So I was like, that's one thing that's kind of making me iffy about continuing this thing. Said, I don't know what your viewpoint is or stance on, basically relationship with God, but I feel like I have a decently strong relationship with God, but I am by no means perfect. And a lot of my actions contradict that. Maybe not on social media because it's like, oh, okay, I want to keep a clean image or whatever, but my actions contradict that. Point number 3, I was like, I basically in the past 10 years of my life have created a habit of dating women short term or not dating and just kind of hooking up rampantly. And then in times where I was working very hard in my job and career, but hit stress points, probably watching way too much porn or whatever. And it just became bad habits. So that was that. And then I was like, and the other thing is, in the past 4 years, no, this was 27. So I guess in the past like 3 years, from 24 to 27, I was like, kind of been in the fitness industry, sponsored by a supplement company, and going to expos, being around the fitness industry. And I probably have an unhealthy enjoyment of extremely fit women, right? And that's kind of what my mind goes to. So I was like, that's just kind of who I am and where I'm at. And I said, and also, I'm not ready to just commit to dating you because I just enjoy dating. I said, so I know all of these things are contradictions. I know that, me saying, oh, I don't want to settle here when we aren't even dating, why should that matter now? I know that I'm saying, oh, I have a relationship with God, but everything I'm doing over here from a relation with women's standpoint or whatever is not honoring him in any sort of way. So, but the thing that it did was it let my guard down and it helped me do one thing. It was the first time where I was brutally honest with a woman. And what it did was it spiraled things in a better direction. So what that transparency did from a transformation standpoint, it started transforming our relationship. She sat there, and to kind of wrap the story up, and she looked at me and was like, I really appreciate you telling me all that. I also don't want to settle in San Diego, lived here my whole life. She's like, you never asked what my relationship with God is like. She's like, I grew up going to church. She's like, I wanted and want to meet someone who has a strong relationship with God because I really haven't, and it hasn't helped in certain areas of my life. So, that's great. And she's like, and I never asked you to solely date me or anything. She's like, I'm not going to ask you what you're doing, but I'm just going to be here. I'm not going to date anyone, but I want to build a better relationship and friendship with you. And if you're ever ready, like, let's have a conversation about it. But I don't want to, have an ultimatum. And she's like, and I never expected you to be perfect. And I appreciate you being honest. And she goes, and then she laughs. She goes, now, was that all of that honesty easy for me to hear? Absolutely not. But do I respect and appreciate the fact that you were honest? Yes. And that was the first time that I also felt that I was truly respected for, I won't say my character, because in the past I didn't have the best character in that aspect, but the character of a man that I wanted to be. And it helped. So that transparency helped transform me, because I was like, wow, this person respects my character. I want to be more like that. And that transformed our relationship, because we're sitting together saying we can have an open, honest relationship. And that transformed her, because she's like, wait, we can have an open and honest relationship. And wow, maybe there are men out there who definitely aren't perfect, but they'll be honest. So that's something where it's letting your guard down and opening up. And I know that I use a relational example there. It helps so much, being honest and letting your guard down does so much more in the long run. It's kind of like the analogy. If you buy cheap, it costs you more in the long run. You buy expensive, it'll cost you a whole lot less in the long run. I kind of apply it to this too. You do the hard work by letting your guard down pretty early in areas of your life, and it's going to benefit you so much more in the long run. The more you hide, the more you keep your guard up, all that stuff, it's eventually going to come out, and it's not going to bode well in the long run. So that's to wrap that second point up. Let your guard down. Number 3 is avoid other people's opinions. Now, this is a big one, because we're on social media. I keep using that. We're in the social era. Everybody has an opinion, and it's such a low barrier to entry. I have a podcast. This is a very low barrier to entry. I've never, been a TV pundit, a journalist. I don't have a journalism degree. It's a low barrier to entry, right? So that means everybody can have an opinion about everything and want you to do a thing a certain way or say a certain way, say things a certain way. But you got to listen, like, not everybody's opinion matters. When you become more transparent, people are going to be more opinionated, often against it, because it's easy and it's easier to keep the mess in the bedroom. It's easier to say, let's not talk about this. It's easier to say, let's not dive into this. I have conversation with my guys and we have open conversations about relationships. We have open conversations about porn and what that does to our brains. We have open conversations about areas that we want to improve in our careers, our relationships. We have open conversations about areas where we feel inadequate and insecure about. When those conversations start coming to the forefront, not everybody's ready for them. A lot of the content that is circulating in viral content is very surface level. A lot of that deep stuff is now starting to be circulated a little bit more, which is great because that's the stuff that's real. That's the stuff that's needed, but not everybody is going to appreciate it. And I think it's because not everybody is ready for it. I speak from experience. When I would see things that contradicted the lifestyle that I was living in it, I was like, man, I kind of want to scroll past this because I don't care. But it was more so because I was like, it's contradicting what I want, but it's giving me what I need. And it was hard for me to really understand that. I wanted to not focus on areas that I know I needed to improve. I wanted to not listen to somebody else's transparency because I was like, it's not where I want to be. But that being said, if there are opinions that are against you being transparent and vulnerable and trying to help others or trying to get help from others, just know that, hey, that's okay. It might not be for them at that time, and they might just not be ready for it. But don't take it personal because we're all going through things. Not every opinion that's a bad opinion means a person's a bad person. It just might mean that they might be going through something where it's just not, it's hitting them in a certain way that doesn't make them feel good, that opens up a wound, and there's nothing you can do about that. So, you just have to know that if you don't share your transparency, you could be blocking your blessing, and you could be blocking somebody else's blessing of them transforming and helping them out. The one thing that I've been so blessed about this podcast is that I have friends that hit me up that watch it and they say, man, this point really helped me out. And in my mind, I'm like, dang, that point was in minute number 8. You listen I'm shocked, right? But I'm so happy because then we can have conversations about that. And even if, the views are little, I'm like, I don't care. Like if it helps one person, I'm good, and that is a beautiful thing because that's what matters. I want to help people. I want to be vulnerable and transparent, and I don't care how people perceive it or whatever. If they don't like it, it's like, no, because there could be somebody who is at their wits' end in a specific area of their life who desperately needs to hear something that helps them. And that's how you have to view transparency. When you see someone who might need a little help, it's okay to start with you and to start with, I failed here. I went through this. So my dad and I have such a strong relationship because if there's a stress point, I'm like, Dad, this is kind of what I'm struggling with. Before he jumps and gives me advice, he's like, oh, I remember when I went through this. And then he tells me what happened. Then I can take a deep breath and I can say, oh, okay, this is nice. You went through it too. Now, all of everything, the angst I have about bringing it up it's gone. We can talk about it because I don't feel like an alien because I now realize that I have somebody who I can connect with. And that's why we're vulnerable, because there's that connective tissue, because we can bring people in instead of push people out. Everybody's got problems. Everybody goes through these things. So typically if you have an issue or whatever, there's somebody else who's struggling with the same thing or has, and they can talk to you about it. You can talk to them about it, or somebody who's about to go through it, you can help out. So that's why being vulnerable is so important. To kind of recap it, First thing is have a level view of yourself. We are not the main character in everybody's story. We're the main character in our story. So that means that us being vulnerable doesn't really cost us anything. Number two is let your guard down. Let people into the bedroom. Sometimes okay to let people see the mess because we all have mess, and acting like we don't have mess is crazy. We all have mess. So when you let your guard down and you show somebody else your mess, they show you your mess. Now we can figure out, with our bedroom doors open, how can we clean this up a little bit? That's a great thing. Number three is avoid other people's opinion. Everybody else is going to have an opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. Not everybody is ready to listen to what you have to say. Not everybody agrees with what you have to say, and that's okay. But there could be someone out there who desperately needs what you have and desperately needs to hear, what you have to say, because their transformation is riding on your transparency. Our word of the day or word of the week, however you want to stretch it, is share. I want this word to be a strong one because sharing it sounds cliche, but sharing is caring. When you share your story, when you share your testimony, when you share your struggles, your doubts, your insecurities, your fears, your vulnerabilities, all of this, it brings people in. Sharing, if I have a sandwich and I share half of it with you, now we are sitting and we are having a same experience, the shared experience. We can, at least, if we have nothing else in common, we have the sandwich in common that we can talk about. And that can lead to so many other things. I try not to get emotional when I talk about this because the most important people in my life have cared enough to share with me. They've cared enough to share their challenges. They've cared enough to share their struggles. They've cared enough to share their care with me. My parents care so much to share everything that they have with me. Sharing is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Don't limit someone else's transformation because you're not willing to share some of the mess that you have that could be so vital and important to someone else's life. I talk to people and we have very candid conversations, and you'd be shocked the amount of depression, anxiety, and things people go through. And how much them sharing with me has helped transform my life, right? Like I'm not a guru about stuff, right? Like I'm taking information in just like everybody else. And I'm like, man, this is transformational for me. Like, thank you for sharing that, because maybe at some point in time, that issue is going to hit me in the head. Maybe that's going to hit a family member. Maybe that's, and I won't know what to do. But the fact that you cared enough to share, I now at least have a tool to help, right? So let's share. Let's be more open. Let's be more real. Let's be more vulnerable. Let's be more authentic. Let's be more transparent about things. So, I know these podcasts are typically upbeat and everything, but I wanted to really drive this point home because, man, with everything that we have in life today, and it's like we have a lot, right? Like we have a lot. We are still the saddest, most depressed, most comparative, most, whatever society. And it's like, why is that, right? And it's like, can we slightly change that? Like, and I just want to do my part by sharing a little bit, and maybe it only helps one person, but that's fine. But maybe that person helps another person. That's great. And maybe that person goes on to help 1,000 people, and that's even better. And so share. Continue to talk, continue to be open, continue to be open about struggles, continue to be transparent. It's the most beautiful thing that will help yourself. It will help other people and their transformation. So I hope that you enjoyed today's podcast. I'm going to keep sharing. I hope you keep sharing. We will keep doing it together, and I will see you next time. Peace. Thank you all so much for watching the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. If you like this podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, send it to friends, use a carrier pigeon, do whatever you have to do. We hope that this inspires you to chase your greater vision in your life and for us to continually and consistently do it together.